I think as well, Juliet, a lot of people are hazy as to their legal rights and position in this situation. I mean, pretty much every company. I mean, the point is with the, as your article says, and with HR generally, we are talking private companies, public sector companies, charities, almost every organisation now.
Yeah.
And they've been suffused, I would say, with critical race theory and, as you say, with gender ideology. People do not know what they can and cannot do. So, for example, unconscious bias training is a well-known one. Do people have to go on it? Do you know? I mean,
I think people do have to, if their company rolls out a training program, I think they do have to go on it. I don't think they have to, if their company then, there was a case actually that I looked at, I can't remember if I mentioned it in the piece, where it was an IT consultant. She was made to do unconscious bias training. She did it, but then at the end there was a questionnaire where you had to fill in, are you biased now? And I think you had to answer no, because you'd done the training, so that had expunged you of your sins and purified you. And she said, well, I feel this is a lie because, you know, maybe I am biased. I don't want to fill in this questionnaire. I feel it's a sort of, you know, like she's being made to take an oath or almost a religious ritual.
Also, the whole implication is that you were before.
Yeah, exactly.
Even you might feel you weren't.
Yeah, and now you've sort of been confessed your sins or whatever it is. Anyway, so she said, I'm not going to do this, and she won that case. Oh. So there are, it's a murky area, and some of these norms are now being set through tribunals. But if people aren't sure, what they should do is get advice from a union. Now, what they should not do is go to the traditional unions, who are members of the Trade Union Congress, because actually they too have been overtaken by the same thing, and they're just as much as anyone else promoting, you know, gender theory or critical race theory. But there are smaller unions who are now expanding to fill this gap, and there's the Workers of England Union, there's a union called Affinity, and there's the Free Speech Union, which I have a role on the advisory board of, an unpaid role, I should say. Right. But there's basically advice out there for people who aren't sure what they can do.
I mean, you know, we talk an awful lot on this program about the march through the institutions, etc. You know, so names like Rudi Deutsche and Deutschke, and obviously Gramsci are well known to us. I mean, I'm sort of setting you up there for that question, but when, or should I say, why did this happen? I mean, you know, when you look at it, you sort of think, well, we can pretty much see in public sector or whatever why, you know, it's always been slightly more political. When it comes to the fact that now across the board, they're all singing from the same hymn sheet, it's hard not to see, isn't it, that it's sort of almost like a concerted attempt at social engineering. I mean, would you agree with that? Do you think, is it reflected in the people that actually go for these jobs?
Yeah, I think it's partly that. I don't think that there's some conspiracy that, you know, there's a Marxist vanguard here that has thought this is how we'll spread our ideology and, you know,
it's bloody effective though,
win
isn't
over
it?
the superstructure or whatever.
Yeah.
But well, it is this is sort of effectively what's happened. But I don't think there's a conspiracy. I do think that there has been a successful movement that started in universities that said, you know, a lot of these ideas started in very small, unpopular departments in universities, and then, you know, has effectively expanded. You know, people who've been through that education have now graduated into the workforce. Some of them have, you know, a notion of what they're there for, what their life is for, what their career is for. At the same time, you have a sort of so there's demand for these jobs. At the same time, you have an industry creating these sorts of jobs where you can go into a workplace and often not do anything that's very productive. That's also, you know, some of these degrees in these jobs have lower entry requirements. They're quite a steady route into a steady job, a steady career. You know, and a lot of the people have not thought hugely deeply about a lot of the ideology that's then coming through. And then you also combine with that have norms on the other side coming from sort of business academia that have created openings which weren't ideological, particularly, which often started off as a commercial or a management tool. And one of those, for example, is the concept of psychological safety.
Yeah.
And there was a Professor Amy Edmondson who coined this phrase in a business context. And the way that she meant it was, you should make sure your staff have psychological safety, because what that means is they can say something a bit outlandish, or they can point out a bad working practice, be a bit of a whistleblower, or take a risk with an idea, and they're not going to get, immediately a pile on. But that in itself is an example of conceptual drift, where you've taken safety, which we all understood to mean physical safety back in the day, and you've added psychological to it. So then it's about your mind, and then you add ideology into it, where you say you add microaggressions, for example, where someone might be insulting me, or I think that. Or I know, or I have a strong instinct that what that person did is to do with my race, which may be correct in some instances, may in others not be correct. But you add that in, and suddenly your notion of safety has become, well, I don't think anyone should be allowed to roll their eyes at me in the workplace, or if someone refers to some history, like our grandparents fought in the Second World War for freedom. That's a microaggression, because actually my grandparents came from a totally different background, and suddenly you're in a kind of ratchet where the radical ideology has combined with often fairly benign or unsurprising kind of jargon, basically. Almost like taking something that's really quite straightforward, like people should be able to say dumb or controversial things in the workplace, take a risk, adding jargon to it, and then adding ideology, and this is what you get.
And it turns out to be the exact opposite, doesn't it? I mean, in the sense that now I would have thought the workplace is an unsafe place for many people. Because, you don't know what you can say. So it must make it an incredibly hard thing to face, for many people every day. Okay, so obviously, maybe not a conspiracy, but obviously extremely powerful now.
There's also a class element to this, of course, which is that this is a very sort of middle to upper class set of norms.
It's very female, isn't it? It's like 3/4 women, isn't that right? Working in I don't know, what that particularly means.
Tend to be, I think, more middle class women. There's often, in some workplaces, you'll have a dynamic where, HR, it's HR versus the more working class professions, whether it's firefighters or factory workers, or, and there's a set of norms and language. There's always been class signaling through language as to whether you belong or whether you don't. And this is another way of doing that. It's another way of policing people's speech. But it's kind of interesting that this is from the left, because in theory the left is meant to be in favor of the proletariat and the bottom up. But it's kind of through the maelstrom of culture has inverted itself in many cases.
Yes, and also there are these whole other notions that come into HR now, which are connected to this, like general well-being, mindfulness, whatever. And apart, whatever you think about those concepts, I don't have much time for them, but essentially they're entirely subjective, aren't they? And what exactly does this mean? And whose business is it, of these people to actually enforce this, or try to?
Well, again, this is something that has moved from the realm of common sense discussion into this sort of jargonized, realm of concepts. So you could take the common sense case. If someone goes off work with stress, or they have a mental breakdown, or they have caring responsibilities, or they have a baby, it used to be back in the day that workplaces weren't very sympathetic to that. It was sink or swim on your own. And one of the good trends that has come out of some of this is now more workplaces say, well, actually we recognize that, if we wait a bit, or we support you, or we offer you some flexibility, often people can come back. and, and then be productive or, get their life back on track. But we've morphed from that into this thing, well-being, which was massively accelerated by COVID and the whole working from home thing, which has now become a huge battleground because most managers, frankly, want their employees back in, but they can't get them back in. And the human resources departments, who's meant to be managing this, are the last people who are still at home, and so they have no leg to stand on. They have no leg to stand on in bringing people back. But it's morphed now into, through the idea of psychological safety and all these other concepts, that people need to be able to bring their whole selves to work. This is something a Bank of England manager said, that the notion that if you're not allowed to talk endlessly about your problems at work, for example, that's an affront to your mental well-being and your safety. Or the notion that if you can't work from home, or most days of the week, or you can't go off and take a yoga break or whatever, that the company is not caring for you. Companies are now expected not just to pay you well and make sure that your rights are respected, but they're meant to look after you like a parent, almost, and to coddle you. And this Jonathan Haidt has written about this concept that we have a generation of people who haven't fully grown up because they haven't been allowed to take risks on their own, and they expect organizations to be their parent more than to be a transaction, a relationship of sort of work for pay or involving loyalty, but essentially not one that involves that kind of care. So there's a category confusion there.
I think recently, obviously, Elon Musk, right, said basically to his employees, you've got to come back.
Yeah.
And I think he specifically mentioned human resources, because they tend to like to be at home. But he said, this is one thing you cannot do from home.
Yeah.
Do you think, finally, that it would be a good thing for companies if they actually just, let's take the whole thing down to like 3 or 4 people again, and just dismantle this?
Yeah. I think the truth is basically managers have to take this in hand. They cannot just let this dynamo do its own thing anymore. And it involves some effort and some dealing with stuff that frankly most of them view as a waste of time, which is to say, what do we actually want from our workforce? What should the norms be, their rights, their holiday or whatever? Pare it down to that. What do we actually do that affects retention? Let's do that. And let's get rid of all the other crap. And let's, not worry about what they're going to say about us on Twitter. And, make sure that base is covered. Make sure you do it in a way that's not going to unnecessarily sort of knock the wasp's nest and set off something. Defend yourself. But say, we need to sit down with these people and say, do you realize what your job is? Because what you're doing isn't it. And so, and in a way, I think it could be quite a simple thing to solve, because actually the law and the powers are often still with the managers, if they're prepared to put in the time and the effort and frankly, have the guts to do it, then there's a way to do it.
Well, guts, I think that's the main thing. That's one of the things that seems to be missing at the moment. Juliet, thanks so much. I know that people are going to be very interested in this. Actually, I know I am. Thank you for coming and explaining it to us. That is it for this week. You can read Juliet Samuel in the Telegraph every week.
Yes, every Saturday, and the piece is called How the HR Monster Throttled the Workplace. So
there you go.
You look it up online on the Telegraph website.
Thanks so much, Juliet. So see you next week. Thank you. Bye. Hello. If you're enjoying the New Culture Forum channel and you believe in our mission, may I invite you to join our membership scheme at the link below or on our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Our work is more important now than ever, and we have great plans ahead for the future, but we can't do it without your support. From as little as £3 per month, you can help ensure that we continue on our mission. As a member, you'll receive a range of benefits, including access to exclusive content, invitations to our private events, including here at our studios, free copies of our books, and much, much more, including, of course, our famous NCF mug. If you aren't able to become a member, then please help us by clicking this button and subscribing to our channel. It's completely free. Just remember to also click the bell icon so that you can get notifications when we post new videos. Thank you.